Previously on our Kentucky Route Zero saga.
I guess the common thread throughout almost every element of this game so far has been debt. You wake up without a leg.
Where's my leg? And that's when you meet new characters, right?
That's right, Junebug and Johnny.
Do we want to talk about the really good moment where Junebug sings and it's a beautiful moment?
100%.
Well, I mean,
you come upon the Hall of the Mountain King, this disastrous mess of technology and fire and metal. The story that's being told in this adventure game that you're playing on Xanadu is that there are ties between the story that's being told on that adventure game and the first interlude, the limited demonstrations that we played.
There's a whole distillery underneath you. And not only is there a whole distillery underneath you, nobody in this distillery is weirded out at all that you just stumbled into it. Great, you're just about late. Let's get you through the onboarding process. And throughout this experience, you can always kind of go back to saying like, but actually I'm just here for directions. I just kind of got lost. I need to leave.
You get to the point where you Doolittle's like, cool, tour's over, great job. Let's just have a celebratory drink of top shelf Hard Times whiskey stuff. You just kind of drank from that top shelf whiskey, which isn't cheap, and I just wasted a whole bunch of my time to give you a tour, which, again, waste the company time. It sounds like you're gonna have to work that off. I was just like, debt!
Super, super frustrating.
Welcome to episode 96 of the Left Behind Game Club. This week, we play Kentucky Route Zero, Act 4. Let's get right into it. You're listening to the Left Behind Game Club. Welcome to the Left Behind Game Club, our never-ending attempt to make sure that no game is left behind. I'm your host, Jacob McCourt, and today I have two friends with me. The first friend, you know him, you love him. His name is Michael Ruffalo.
I'm excited to talk about a girthy episode or act of this game.
And here to talk about Act 4 of Kentucky Route Zero, it will be his 7th time on the show, Adam Iannetta. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me back.
You've been on for all these Kentucky Route Zero episodes, so let's just continue with this series. This is Act 4 of Kentucky Route Zero, developed by Cardboard Computer, published by Annapurna Interactive. If you're coming into this without having listened to our other 6 episodes of this series, you may want to hit pause on this one, go back to the first episode of our Kentucky Route Zero series, which is Kentucky Route Zero Act 1. Start with that, and we hope you make it here. Mike, you said that this episode is quite girthy. What did you mean when you said that?
I meant that there is not only a lot that happens, but it is, I think, the lengthiest episode or act of this game so far.
Did a lot happen, though?
I would say so. I would say there's a very monumental thing that happens in this act. Do you not think so?
I would actually go as far as to say I disagree with you, Michael, there, because contrasted with the events of Act 3, while there were some pretty big moments within this scene, this act, I found it more along the lines of just further character development, and certainly nothing as jarring as what we saw from Act 3, and I think one of the characters puts it quite nicely in this act. They refer to it as a pleasant detour, and that's how I sort of interpreted the rest of this playthrough of this act. So, but for all of those on the Discord, please feel free to come at me with your I will be the drawn. I will be the scapegoat. So
no, I wanted to be the scapegoat because this episode is Seinfeld. This whole thing is Seinfeld.
No, you missed it.
It's a show about nothing.
You missed it. You missed it. You totally missed it.
I missed it hard. So why don't we just get right into it, and then you can educate us, Michael, on how we have completely missed the boat. Wink.
Oh,
gotta love
Jacob,
a good dad joke.
You make a concerted effort to make me groan in every episode of this podcast.
And hey, guess what? Lately, it's been a more and more frequent occurrence.
You're succeeding. You're succeeding.
Thank you.
You're figuring out the pun button that makes me go, ugh.
Tell us about the elephant in the room, or rather, the mucky mammoth.
You're the worst.
This man is
Jacob
on fire.
Speaking of on fire, so where we left off in Act 3 was at the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces with a loud foghorn of a boat pulling up, and Conway realizing that, well, I guess I work for the Hard Time Distillery now. I guess I have a new gig, a new job. And then we played the interlude.
Here and there along the echo.
Here and there along the echo.
Here and there along the echo. Traveler's Guide to the Zero. And we were confronted with a telephone that told us a bit about some of the places that we would stumble across and things we might see in this act. And what this act, I think, largely is about is shifting, I think, our perspective from Conway as the main character, as the person we experience a lot of the story through, even though this game largely took place in third person and you got to control both what Shannon would say and Conway would say in one conversation. This is a move where we see Conway develop, into more of a character and less someone that we are controlling and making decisions for. And so we hop on board the boat, and there is, instead of a foghorn, it's a mechanical elephant that makes the foghorn sound, and it's creaking and it's groaning, and there's something wrong with it, and it's the humidity.
One thing I found really interesting about this act is that, so as we had discussed in previous episodes, a lot of the destinations within this game are primarily fictitious, but it does take place in Kentucky, and actually there is such a place in Kentucky known as the Echo River, and it's inside of what is known as Mammoth Cave.
Get out of here!
Stop.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't appreciate this until after the fact, and I was just doing some research on the previous interlude here and there along the Echo, and I just typed in Echo River, and it said, "Oh, the Echo River is a body of water that exists subterranean inside the Mammoth Cave." And I thought, Mammoth Cave, Echo River, Mucky Mammoth. Layers upon layers upon layers. It's
folding
just,
in on itself.
Shrek is just peeling the onion more and more and more. So
yeah, I guess we start out this episode. That's like an incredibly cool fact. I'm still kind of like mind blown about that. But we start out this episode with Will trying to figure out the operations manual for this mammoth, and it's kind of nonsensical. Kind of doesn't make sense. But at this point, what do we expect, really? Do we expect a straightforward operations manual on how to fix your mechanical mammoth? I think not.
I think my favorite part of Kentucky Route Zero is the world that they've built. And at least for the last two openings, this one and Act 3's opening, it just hits you how hard the art direction is in this game. It opens to this mammoth who is just, its trunk is going up on a boat, and even when you explore the boat, kind of like the first act, just kind of melts away and you begin to see the inside of it. I love the world and I love the art direction in this game. I think that's the biggest thing I'm going to take away from this whole experience.
On top of that, I would say that since the beginning, the game has grown artistically. Whereas, at the very beginning, they were just sort of these static scenes where, you could go from the top level to the lower level, but you were still in the same area. Whereas now, for example, exploring the Mucky Mammoth, you have a full 360 perspective of the ship that you can explore. It's amazing. And, having the chance to go inside the boat, we see that same sort of Paper Mario-esque scene transition where the walls just seem to peel away like individual strips of paper. So it's and I feel as though, and I'm sure we'll discuss this at length later on, but they take a lot more risks with the methods of gameplay and the whole point and click text-based interaction mechanic that they've done so far. They've taken a lot of really, really good risks here. At least I thought so.
In I think film terms, Cardboard Computers really grown in their confidence at directing. They are attempting more ballsy things, more complicated, challenging, visually interesting ways to, get across what they're trying to show here. You could very well see this first scene on top of the Mucky Mammoth, this boat, being done in 2 dimensions, where you're walking from one end of it to the other, and you walk inside, and it's similar to how we experience Equus Oils at the very beginning of the game. You could see it being done like that, but years into development, at the point in which Act 4 is being released, at least 3 or 4 years after the very first, this is a fully 3D, and perspective shifts as you move from different parts of the boat.
Mm-hmm.
I almost wonder how many players, and this is a sidebar that I'll keep very short, I wonder how many players played Act 1 and they weren't necessarily gripped by the world, and there wasn't these cool artistic world-building elements, and they fell off. I really wonder how many people fell off after the first act, and they don't get to see the incredible world that's being built better and better with every single act that goes on.
Well, for those of
Just
them
a sidebar.
For those that did do that, they certainly missed the boat, especially with this act.
I got Adam now!
Just call me the Punisher. So,
so you realize that you can't fix the mammoth, and I think this is when we meet Kate, correct? The theremin player.
The captain of this boat.
Yeah,
correct?
Kate is the captain or pilot of this ship. Clara is another character. She's the theremin player that we meet a little bit later on.
Gotcha. My bad. I guess I might have confused them.
But
sea names.
But apparently, in addition to piloting this vessel, she also is a doula, which is I guess akin to a midwife or a maternity nurse. I couldn't really split the hairs between all of the differences that there are. My wife could, because her mother is actually a maternity nurse, so I'm sure she could give you an at-length description. But in addition to piloting a vessel, she also pilots newly or upcoming mothers on their journey through parenthood.
Huh. Just a fun fact that this character was based on Hecate. Is that the correct way you say that that Greek god? Essentially, they were based on this maternal Greek god that has to do with nature and fertility, and so I think it's probably very fitting that she's a doula.
That's so cool.
Also, I liked her character design too. I felt like she was the first character where I'm like, oh, cool. Like, you're wearing the overalls. Like, you have a look with the big boots too,
as all characters do. So I think at some point we end up taking control of Ezra, and is this the point in which Ezra is given the task to record things throughout the ship?
Yeah,
to record sounds.
Yeah, Johnny gives him a tape recorder because he explains with his own music. He does a lot of what's called found sound music, which is taking pre-recorded noises from everyday life, whether they're bird calls or just plates crashing or anything like that, and somehow incorporating them into recordings of musical instruments being played, or just combining them with other instruments to create something new. And at this point, I started thinking to myself, the reference that's being made here to probably one of the most well-known found sound musicians of the 20th century, John Cage. And I know we had spoken previously about the reference to Junebug and Johnny as June and John Cash, and I thought, okay, I wonder if there's another reference here to maybe John Cage and how for those of you not familiar with John Cage, if you ever get a chance, look up one of his most well-known pieces, 4 minutes and 33 seconds, and you'll understand what I mean when I say how he specialized in the idea of using found sounds and creating it as a form of music. You know what? I would hazard a guess that
allusion or reference was doubled up there. That it was both a Johnny and a John Cage reference in combo. But so, we have, I think, one of the most crucial conversations that happens right here on the boat, knowing that the boat is how we get to Dogwood Drive, get to the end of our journey. And Shannon's having a conversation with Conway, and they, I think, end up having this conversation where Shannon, you get to choose whether you say like, oh right, like as much as I feel you're my friend, I barely know you. Like I don't really know you that well, and I don't know why that you're doing the things that you're doing. Like ultimately taking on this job at the distillery. And I feel like this conversation is where we get a much clearer sense of who Conway is, aside from the character that we've been controlling and playing this whole time.
Is this the first time we noticed that one of his other limbs may have disappeared?
Yes. This is the first time we actually see that. In addition to his leg now being this crystalline shape and color akin to the Hard Times distillery workers, his opposite arm is now the same consistency. And I mean, the first time I saw that, I immediately thought to myself, debt! It's debt! The crushing theme that is just constantly
right?
weighing down this entire game. It is debt. And in addition to that, we learn so much more about Conway because we take on the role of Shannon, and this is probably the first time I've ever heard Conway say something really interesting or of any real depth in this game thus far. And I think that's because he unfortunately has given up his 15-year Alcoholics Anonymous chip and has started drinking again and has now got liquid courage on his side. And I think one of the most interesting things he says at the beginning of this act is something along the lines of, memories are kind of like the breadcrumbs of our thought processes or things like that, and you kind of following those breadcrumbs back to a memory that you may or may not remember to be true or not. And I thought, that's the most interesting thing he said this entire game thus far. Up until now, I just kind of thought of him as this Billy Bob Thornton truck driver with, one-dimensional. But now there's something there. There's a real character here. And as we progress on throughout this act, you get to see more and more of this character in various colors, shapes, and sizes. Adam,
you said so many interesting things in there. The first thing that I thought of when I saw the arm was missing is the expression, it cost me an arm and a leg. So again, just the whole debt theme is coming back, but it just made me incredibly angry. I think that seeing his arm and leg gone, and just him being kind of okay with the fact that he's lost more of himself, not only physically but also spiritually, and the fact that now he's drinking. And all that he kept saying, and I think he said it multiple times in the episode, is that he just wants to die with dignity, and dying with dignity is a thing that kept coming back. But I just felt incredibly angry throughout this entire game because Conway gave it all up because of debt, I guess. Mike?
He was driven to drink.
Yeah.
He kind of felt like he didn't have anything to live for anymore. Or at least that was my view of it. I want to touch on the conversation of debt. Conway has a really good quote in there that, I don't think is the most profound thing, but definitely struck me, which is, quote, "I've got to repay my debt. Hell, I should be grateful for the opportunity. If you want to die with any dignity, you've got to settle up. That's why it's such a damn shame when people go sudden." And, back to what you were saying, Adam, that yes, debt, crushing debt is the thing that this game is about. And if we didn't clue into it earlier, the miners literally being drowned in a water, drowning in their debt, is another illusion. All of these buildings being underwater, another form of being in debt.
Wake up, people!
Yeah. I think the thing that this episode or this act made really, really clear to me is that it's debt beyond just a financial level. It's debt in the sense of obligation. And we were given a hint of that, I think, earlier in the entertainment when the daughter was cutting off her parents. and cutting off their tab and not allowing them to, essentially drink themselves into poverty. That it goes beyond just, I have to pay this amount of money back. It goes to, well, if this guy's not going to be able to complete the thing that, he said he was going to, I'm going to do it for him because I have an obligation. And it's a question that's posed throughout the game. Why is Conway so dedicated to getting this last shipment to Dogwood Drive? It doesn't seem like his boss is there anymore, right? It doesn't seem like the other person who he'd be working for, Lisette, is mentally, understanding what's happening. It seems like he's just doing it out of a sense of duty. Or an obligation. So, to me, this was an episode or an act that made it really clear it's not just financial debt; it's obligation as a whole.
Yeah, one quick comment, and then I think we'll move on. I immediately thought of the river Styx throughout this entire section, because you're going down the river just like you would in mythology, and along the river Styx to your death. The Hard Times boys, as we've coined them, remind me a lot of Hades. Mm-hmm. And sorry that I keep going back to mythology, but I got a lot of that vibe throughout this act. We'll touch on the miners thing later, because I think it had something to do with capitalism rather than debt. But I digress. The second scene is just a gas station, right?
So yeah, I think we should just give one little bit of more context, which is that the in the first act you are driving as a wheel along the different roads of Kentucky. In the, I think, second or third act, we are flying on the back of an eagle or in the talons of an eagle across Kentucky. In this one, we are in a boat just sailing our way through the Zero down the river. On our way to Dogwood Drive, and we hit location after location, and we decide one of two things. Are we going to be picking one character to, entertain with, or are we going to pick another? And the first one along the way, as Jacob said, is the gas station.
Mm-hmm. And I think that, and I want to ask this question just to make sure I understand. My thought too was that you can either pick to go on whatever adventure you have to take in that scene, or you can just stay on the boat too, right? Like, in addition to it being different characters, it's either like do the thing or stay on the boat and don't do the thing. Absolutely. Yeah, those are the two primary choices you have throughout this entire act. And the other thing that's worth mentioning is that contrasted with every other act where you have direct control of your vehicle from one destination to the other, you never play the role of Kate piloting the ship. The boat moves on its own, and the only thing that you really control during these scene changes from one scene to the other during the overworld map is the dialogue that Will begins to spin as he's basically telling the story of your adventures along the Echo River and what it is that you see and how the characters are reacting and responding to one another. And I think there'll be times where, like, one of us chose to stay in the boat, so the other two might have to lead the discussion. But I think for this first one, I'm assuming that all three of us went to the gas station, right? Yes. I actually didn't. Oh, really? Oh, you didn't? Yeah. Okay. I chose to stay on the boat. And I'm glad I did, because there were some really interesting parts. The first one was, so you play the role of Ezra, and you actually, the scene starts with you sitting at the helm of this ship, and you're looking around, surveying the landscape, and Kate finds you and says, "Oh, thanks for manning things in the at the wheel while I was downstairs working on something. Don't tell anybody I let you control the ship for a little bit." So here we are, just this adorable little boy in his like Sunday best suit driving this little Theodore the Tugboat-esque tugboat, and finally, once she's finished with her bidding downstairs, she allows you to kind of explore the ship and interact with some of the other characters.
There's a great line, I think, that Johnny says in regards to Ezra, and he says, he's a kid, but he's his own damn person. which really rings true. Like, yes, Ezra's a kid, but he seems like he has real personality. Like he's more than just, some young kid that's hanging around. And he has quirks and his own, I guess I just keep repeating it, but personality.
And more than that, he's given so much more responsibility in this act, in this specific scene, even after having been entrusted to drive the boat. Kate then asks her, why don't you give Will a hand downstairs, because he's busy reworking some of the maps, because apparently one of the token features about the Echo River is that things don't always stay the same for very long, and the map is constantly changing. And so she's talking about different landmarks that they should be looking out for. It's like, I think the gas station is just past Dinosaur Rock. It's like, well, I haven't seen any rocks that look like dinosaurs yet. But, the river kind of changes things over time, and things move around all the time. So why don't you give Will a hand with the map? And this is where we actually get a chance to meet one of the previously mentioned characters, Clara, who is also a musician and who knows Johnny and Junebug. And interestingly enough, she plays a theremin, which is that instrument that we know from all of the token 1970s, 1980s, very cheesy alien sci-fi movies that make sort of the Exactly. And
it's the only instrument you don't touch.
Exactly. That was, like, by far the best line that Shannon, or was it Shannon or Clara who says it? The only instrument that you never ever touch. And again, going back to the references that we're seeing throughout here, Clara is actually, her name is based off of Clara Rockwell, who is actually probably the only theremin virtuoso that ever existed. So it's pretty interesting to see where they draw their inspiration from. So we get a chance to meet with Clara and see Shannon interact with the theremin, and then you're given the chance to help Will sort of rework some of the maps, and you're given a choice between using a nice clean map or an old dirty map or sort of a faded one. But that's really the meat and potatoes of this scene. Nothing really more substantial happens beyond that.
Jacob, do you want to walk us through what happens at the gas station? Glory, it's good to be among friends. Yeah,
so Al is, I guess, one of the main characters on this floating gas station, which I don't remember which character alludes to it, but they're like, hey, this gas station doesn't really have a fixed location, but it's always here when I need it. And you meet Al, who that's kind of his most famous line in all caps, right? Glory, it's good to be among friends.
Yeah. And he tells this story about sailing down, what is it, the Echo? And sailing down the river and not having any light and, only having a bag of apples. And getting to his last apple and finding that there was a maggot in it. Oh. And he waits until the very end, and then the maggot turns into a firefly, and it gives him some light. And he's able to find his way out.
Now sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
Which to me just seemed like, a bit of an allegory or a metaphor for, just when you think you've hit rock bottom, just when you think you're at the end of your leash, all you need is a little light to find your way back to everyone else.
Now, beyond that, there's also a gas station attendant who doesn't have a name and who essentially alludes to the fact that no one ever remembers his face.
That's because he's selling crystal.
Because he's selling crystals.
What?
But you don't even get his name throughout.
No,
and he talks about this character, gender I don't know, essentially tells how he or she sells crystals, used to live in Cleveland, Ohio, lived off a hotel inheritance, like took this job because they had to. It was just like a really interesting and bizarre, like, I guess, another character that fits into the mythology of like, now I'm just here, I guess. That seems to be the thing in this game, is I guess I'm here now.
Was this also the scene where there is the vending machine, I guess, with the claw?
No, that's towards the end.
That's later? Okay.
Sam and Ida's.
We'll save that then.
Yeah, this one is about Al, Norm, and so Norm mistakes Junebug for another woman. It's
a woman he's
really
met online.
Bizarre.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And then she helps him with his online dating profile, which I thought was amazing.
That's essentially the gas station, and then you gas up and then you move on, right? And then you move on and you're given another choice for scene 3 of either the Rum Colony or, again, staying on the Mucky Mammoth.
I definitely took the Rum Colony.
I, too, chose the Rum Colony this time.
I did as well, and I am so glad because this is one of my favorite locations in the entire game.
It's not only beautiful and aesthetic, but I feel like you learn a lot about Conway along the way. You stumble into him and other members of the Bureau of Reclaimed Spaces just totally drunk out of their minds, passed out in the sand, just enjoying their life, blissed out.
The first thing I thought of when I saw Conway and was just chatting with him was Conway is no longer Conway. Conway is Florida Stanley from the post-Michael Scott episodes of The Office. Florida Stanley smiles. Florida Stanley is always present and has a good time. So he was just fun-loving. I'm sorry. It was hilarious to see him go from one polar opposite to something like this, where he is just having a good time. A character that I thought at the very beginning was all about just getting the job done and getting it done as quickly as possible, to now just kicking back and enjoying some sort of drink that nobody really remembers the name to, but it's got some sort of pink flower. So
I don't know if you guys actually looked through the menu kind of at the bar, but imagine that there's a bar and then there's a beach right around this bar, and then there's water kind of on the beach. If you go into the kind of tiki hut, there's a menu where you can look at all the drinks that are in there. And I don't know about you guys, but I at least look at a few of the drinks. A lot of them involve rum. Surprise.
I didn't see that. I didn't notice that.
Death. Yeah, so you could actually look at all of the recipes. The Invisible Death, my friends, is 1 shot of white rum, 2 shots of ugly rum, simple syrup, look for a minute, throw an orange peel on top, and that's the drink.
Oh my gosh.
Very good. Just there's so much writing in this game. It's not even about like quality. The quality is very high, but there's just so much of it in this game, in this act.
The one thing that I wanted to ask you guys your opinion on was this whole destination, looking back at the second interlude, the entertainment, and Harry the bartender is going on about this vacation he did or didn't have, and he says, I can't remember, I was at a beach or I was at a pool, and I thought to myself, is this where Harry went? Is this where he went? Because he even talks about having seen a dinosaur or something like that, and I thought, is he referencing Dinosaur Rock? And he even talks about, I can't remember. So maybe he was present at the Rum Colony on his own little vacation at one point and had this, sort of forget-me-not drink that basically cleared his memory of whatever it was. So I'm very curious to know what your guys' opinions are on that, and if at any point that kind of came to your mind as well.
No, I just had a lot of questions about things that were in the episode. I want to ask Mike too, but it was like, what were the phone calls? What's going on with Conway? Who is Cyrano, and why is he named after Cyrano de Bergerac? That was bad French. Cyrano de Bergerac, which is a 5-act play as well. I just had a lot of questions. I didn't really ask I wonder, in the entertainment, is this a place where Harry went to? Mike, did you even think about that?
No, I definitely did not piece that together. I thought I remembered Harry in the entertainment saying that he went to Louisiana or New Orleans or something along those lines. But I could very well see that also being one of the ways this game folds in on itself, and finds ways to reference itself multiple times over. What I did love in this scene is the ways, and I say love with some pause, but the ways in which you really get a sense of Conway And he comes and he says, you know, I just feel like buried under my memories. And you can tell that one of the reasons he's drinking is just to kind of escape them, escape the memories of a life, it seems, unfulfilled. You know, wanting to be with Lisette and not being able to in the way that he ultimately wanted to. And now it's too late, and it doesn't seem like he's a man who has much to live for anymore, other than, you know, completing this quest. And it seems to be one of the reasons why he's started drinking, or at least that's my view of it. But it's great because this beach is really dark, and you have a flashlight or a lantern that you can use, and as you walk around you find things in the sand, trading cards, feathers, a bunch of stuff that gives you just a little bit more insight into the world, into Shannon as a character. But one of the things is, if you walk up to Conway the first time, he's just sitting there alone drinking his drink. But when you come back, in the chairs, you only see them when the light flashes on them. It's other hard time boys.
No.
Who are just there as skeletons that he's drinking with.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's an interesting little, I think, allusion as to what's to come.
Yeah, it's much like the degauzing mechanic in the third act, where you would kind of degauze the screen and they'd show up, but in this case you turn the light, or you turn the lamp, and there they'd be. The ambiance in this level is, again, I can't think of a level or a scene that I've liked more. Like, I wanted like Ben Babbitt's version of Kokomo by the Beach Boys to play at that exact moment.
Well, was that not the steel guitar song from Cyrano?
Exactly.
I mean, ish, yeah, but like I wanted vocals and everything. So I'm gonna tweet Ben Babbitt later and be like, "Hey, I want your cover of Kokomo stat." Maybe not on Blank Media though, because Blank Media is at a premium in this world too. The bartender alludes to Blank Media being, or Cyrano says like, "Hey, Blank Media, we have to re-record over our tapes. It's at a premium right now. I guess it's hard to find Blank Media."
Yeah, and I think that's when he talks about the whole idea about re-recording over a tape and sort of having bits and pieces of the previous work sort of seep through into what's new, almost like the idea of like ghosts living within technology, and the whole idea that the memories of something past are now making their way through to what's new. And the really interesting thing here is that while Cyrano is playing on his lap steel guitar, you actually, I think for the first time, get to take on the role of Johnny and basically pick up the cup and collect Cyrano's fee from all of the different patrons around the beach. And your dialogue box is just now a form of currency where certain characters will offer you, I think maybe as high as $15, and others will just not offer you a single thing, but you can still interact with them. So it's really interesting to see the lives of the peddling busker and his entourage.
Do you guys have any other things you want to say about this scene? No? Okay. The fourth scene gives you a choice between a phone or staying on the ship. And I don't know about you guys, but this is kind of where the episode started to lose me.
I stayed on the ship.
I also stayed on the ship.
Oh, no.
Did we all stay on the ship?
No, I took the phone call, and I feel like I'm going to have people are going to miss out on what you could get from the phone, but I'll try my best here, okay?
Give us your best shot.
Yep.
Okay, so Ezra, Julian, Conway, Will, and a bunch of other folks make phone calls, and they're all different kinds of phone calls. Some of them kind of, in my opinion, tie into past things. There's a man that gets to the phone right away, and it's Brandon, who's the janitor from the self-storage facility.
Oh, no.
In the second act.
Hey.
He makes a phone call about how he needs to call his mother for a ride because he played a card game that took way too long, and his mom, it's there. Shannon calls her friend Carrington, who is living in what appeared to me to either be like Latin America or like some kind of, like, it reminded me of like a Brazilian style apartment. that phone call happens. I think it's just a lot of world building within the world. There's also voiceover in this scene, which is the first time I think we've heard voiceover in the entire game. For one section, I think I forget whose phone call, but I heard voiceover come out of my computer and I went, is that this game? Guys, I don't have that much for you apart from that. It's Ezra going to call Julian the Eagle, and Claire and Kate having to do business. There's a lot there, and I'm a dum-dum, so I just kind of lost myself a little bit in that act.
What did the voiceover section talk about, if you don't mind my asking?
I can't remember. Because
I'm really curious. There have been sort of just in my journeys going through the fan wiki, there have been all these theories and conspiracies about certain sections of the game that heavily relied on the audience participation from the players, whereas for instance, going back to Act 3, when you're in the graveyard with Ezra and Junebug looking around the gravestones, the theory was that all of the names mentioned were actually Kickstarter backers who originally helped to fund the game. And so the theory was, with that scene in particular, the telephone calls with the voiceover were actually actual recorded messages from people left behind after using the phone number for here and there along the echo during any one of the extension points where it's like, to talk or to introduce yourself to someone new, dial extension 5276 or whatever it is. And so, but I bear in mind, this is all just one great big pot of creepypasta. So whether or not this is actually real or not, I don't know. It's interesting to make note of. If it is, I mean, kudos to Cardboard Computer for getting that in depth. But I whether or not it is true, the jury is still out.
It's so one of the messages, essentially Willits goes up to the phone and he's like, hey, you have a bunch of missed messages, right? And the message I got was kind of nonsense. It was about bells or something, but I don't remember it of being like any particular interest. I was just more blown away that it was a voice and there was more than one. But a lot of it was just like stories that maybe didn't tie into a specific character, so I kind of just glazed over a bit.
Our adventures on the ship were not nearly as exciting, but so to go back a minute, when you arrive at this telephone booth, you're given the option of either going out off the boat or given the option of, I think it's something along the lines of Blue and Valkyrie, or at least Blue is the name of the dog that I gave. Blue and Valkyrie lounge on the ship, and I was actually kind of excited because Blue, to me, or the dog I should say, is definitely one of the more underappreciated characters in this game up until this point, and I was super excited to finally get the chance to maybe play as him and see how his game mechanics are going to work in his interactions. And so the scene opens up, and you've got Blue sitting next to Valkyrie, who is sort of an Abisan bloodhound or dashhound kind of dog, who belongs to Kate, and they're just sitting there, and the camera slowly zooms in for about 5 to 10 seconds, and that's it. And end of scene.
It was the moment I realized you can either choose to do something or do nothing.
Exactly. This was the point of the game where I literally thought I was being insulted for taking the option to stay on the ship. So for the duration of the game, if I was given the option to stay on the boat, I seldom ever took that option, because I knew they were just going to make fun of me even more. So
Same. So after that we move on to the Radvansky Center.
This place is probably one of my favorite scenes in this entire act.
Yes. And this is where we get teased with Weaver Marquez again. And what the Radvansky Center is Mimi and Jen, two employees who are watching, I guess, security cam footage of the group rolling up to it. And they're watching Shannon, and we're controlling Shannon in this room, filling out a questionnaire. And Shannon essentially saying, like, yeah, this is a way for us to make some money while we're on the trip. and it's about interpreting art and different things and how people react to it. And I love the dialogue between Jen and Mimi back and forth that like, oh man, like it's a guava, but no one would have context for that being a guava. It's a pear, you know, especially because it's a watercolor and not very defined. And also like these results are invalid because everyone's bringing their own life experiences to the mix. Nothing here is objective. And I was like, I love this. This is great. This is the kind of snark I live for.
There was the one moment where I think it's in that room with the archway and the three different paintings where there's just this white kitten sitting at the opposite end of the room, and you're given the option to take a small can of cat food and feed it to the cat. And Mimi and Jen are talking back and forth to one another, and the one says to the other, I don't remember this being a part of the testing. And the other one says, no, sometimes I just forget to feed the cats, so I actually try to get the test subjects to do it for me. And there's just...
I left a Post-it note that said, feed the cat.
Exactly.
I loved it.
The thing that I kind of clung on to here was the first mention of the community television station, WEVP.
Yeah.
Which I'm assuming we'll find out more about later, but I think both Mimi and Jen talk about how they worked there and Marquez used to work there, but again, it's one of those like loose ends that I'm sure will get dealt with later.
Well, I'm not exactly sure it's going to be dealt with, because I feel like this game is the type of game that's going to leave a lot of loose ends just hanging.
You know why I'm convinced?
Why?
Have you ever looked at the beginning screen of this game?
No.
So it's the cardboard computer logo. It's the Annapurna Interactive logo. And in the middle of those two is
the hand with the
WEVP TV logo.
See, I've been so curious about that because that icon shows up regularly on the fan wiki right at the bottom where it shows all the different like information, like the publishers of the site, and then it shows that small icon. So that all makes sense now. So I'm curious to see how much further we get to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this is one of the two grad students explaining their experience with Weaver Marquez being this really bright person who worked in a pretty, low volunteer role as an archivist, and then one day just disappearing. And which, everyone thought was normal. But then for years on, the broadcast at the studio would just drop and it would be replaced by footage of Weaver sitting in the studio, not really doing anything, just standing still. And they could never quite figure out why and what happened. And it was one of those, it's part of the mythology that I love, especially because earlier, they have this conversation about Shannon just kind of being at peace that Weaver's dead. One of the first dialogue options you're given is about how mom didn't let me watch a lot of TV because she thought that's where the ghosts came from. And, Shannon being a TV repair person and having all of these connections to it that, I thought it was a great little part of the magic of this world.
Coconut's
the cat, right?
Coconut is the name of this cat.
I actually didn't remember that at all. Yeah. I kind of thought Jacob was losing it there. He just starts a sentence with coconut. I'm like,
guava, apple, coconut. Coconut's the cat that you end up taking with you back on the ship.
Oh, really? I didn't
realize he came back on the ship.
Yeah, so I think at one point imagine like it's different camera views and they can switch between them to see what the subject is doing in the different rooms, right? At one point they lose track of the cat and they're like, I wonder where the cat went. The cat just disappeared one day. Maybe these guys took them. So they go out and there's a camera outside where the boat is, and they actually see Coconut leave with kind of the big group, including Conway, and at the same time, on the camera view, they see that Conway is again with the people we have called the Hard Time Boys, who they call the creepy distillery guys.
Yeah, this is the first time that I actually saw them in the scene, because I didn't appreciate that you could find them with a flashlight back at the Rum Colony. So it actually spooked me a little bit, because up until now I just kind of thought, no, we're just enjoying this lazy river boat ride down the river until oh no, here comes Det knocking at your door. So
is this the first time that those characters have been acknowledged by someone? I think it may be.
I mean, people have talked about knowing the Hard Time Boys. People definitely recognize when the Hard Time boy entered in the entertainment. Mm-hmm. I think that there are moments throughout, and but I think it's on a case-by-case basis. People are either knowing or afraid of them as the strangers. Because I think if we remember correctly, Xanadu and Dawn, I think they just describe them as the strangers who come to scrape the goo off of the crystals.
That's right.
But what I did love about this scene is you get some outside perspective on the characters that you've come to know and get close to, right? Like Jen and Mimi make comments about Conway looking like he's been through some things, how he's a little run down, and how I think they make comments about how he looks like he's had a history of drinking. So yeah, I appreciated the character building just by observation.
This was the first moment in this act in particular where I sort of had a jaw-dropping moment, or a large gasp at what was slowly beginning to unfold. Because up until now, it's just been sort of a pleasant detour, as Junebug says back at the Rum Colony, because as Mimi and Jen are conversing back and forth with one another, they get on the topic of Mimi's ex-boyfriend, or late ex-boyfriend, because we find out that something terrible happened to him and that he passes away, and she then begins to tell her, well, it was nothing anyone could have done. It was just a freak accident, and he ended up falling off of a roof. And we soon find out that this Mimi character, her boyfriend, was Charlie, who has been referenced previously in Act 3 as, I believe, the son of Lisette and Ira, who ultimately falls off the roof at the home of Lisette, where Conway is now employed. And Conway himself also knew about Charlie and had some sort of relationship there. So it's so interesting to see how two people as seemingly harmless as security camera operators have a dynamic relationship with the characters you're playing along this adventure.
Are those two characters tied into the university? Because this whole study seems to be funded by, I don't know if it's funded by Consolidated Power Company or if it's funded by the university, but they bring in Will, and how I think they call him Wise Will as like a professor at the university. I guess I was confused a little bit there as to where this study that they're conducting kind of ties in. So,
from my understanding, Will actually did work at the at this university, where I believe Mimi and Jen did go to. And fun fact, I'm almost positive he was a music professor, because he talks about how organ was his specialty. So going back to that organ clip from Here and There Along the Echo, I'm almost positive that was a Will original. But they talk about how he ended up losing his job because of just sort of horrible political things within the university, and as protest, he walked out without his shoes and refuses to wear shoes from this moment on.
A true academic.
Exactly. So if you ever see me walking without my shoes, then you know I'm just carrying on the legacy of Will.
After that scene, I will have to leave it to you guys because I ended up chilling and taking a nap.
I did too.
You did too?
Oh, you did?
I didn't know. Is the next scene collecting mushrooms in the grove?
Yeah, a grove.
Yeah. A grove. Yeah, this is a really, really cool scene because it while it is a very static scene unto itself, similar to what we've seen in previous acts, it's literally just this floating rock with all of these beautiful trees and hints of light coming from the ground. I would relate it to... this would be, to me, Cardboard Computer's interpretation of the Deku Forest from The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, because you have these massive trees and just these small glowing lights just floating precariously around you, and you play the role... You simultaneously play the roles of Kate and Ezra, and this is the first time that we get this... and I'm going to try my best to interpret what it was, but whereas in every other scene it's one dialogue box with one set of options, you actually get two dialogue boxes at the same time going back and forth, one being Kate and the other being Ezra. And
Wild.
you literally have a dialogue back and forth with the two of them conversing back and forth, and in addition to the dialogue they have between each other, there are moments of memories that they cherished. And Kate goes on to talk about a stranger that she met in a bar, while Ezra talks about the relationship he had with his mother and father, while at the same time you're helping Kate search for mushrooms that she can use for her homeopathic doula practice. And all the while you're conversing, we finally get a shot of what I can only describe as a literal boatload of cats that just floats on by. It's so this is, if you guys remember from Here and There Along the Echo, the voice operator talks about if you have any inquiries about the Iron Pariah, and this is the Iron Pariah. It is literally a rundown Civil War vessel that is completely unmanned except for all of its inhabitants, which are nothing but cats. Absolutely nothing but cats. Just floating by, and it completely covers the screen, and it's just a black silhouette of this ship covered in cats, and you hear nothing but this chorus of meows and purrs as the ship just lazily floats on by. And Ezra asks Kate, "What on earth is that?" "Oh, that's the Iron Pariah. Just pay no attention to it. It's one of the rarer sights that we see along the Echo."
I am looking at it now because I was curious, and it's the only time I didn't go off the boat, and I very much regret it because it is so cool. It's just like an old decrepit boat that is just casting a huge shadow, and there are literally like 25 to 30 cats on this thing running back and forth.
I honestly had no idea what to think of it. Like it came on and I thought, okay, now the game is really messing with me. This is punishment for, having picked the dog's side of the story while we were on the boat. Now they're just giving me nothing but cats. But apparently it's all a part of the lore that exists within or along the Echo River. So it's a really, really interesting scene within this larger act, because there's a lot of character development, especially for a character such as Ezra, where we don't really know anything about his parents, but he has sort of these flashbacks about how they seem to be running away from something, and they get in a car and they get to a bus station, and they can't really rest until they get to be, or they get to where they need to be. Whereas Kate kind of talks about this what could have been a one-night stand at a bar, but I guess never really followed out anything further than that. And I think it's at this point where I kind of have another one of those eyebrow-raising moments akin to the Rum Colony and Harry's relationship to it, where from the description it makes it seem as though Ezra's parents were actually, and I can't remember their names now, but there was the one lady at the bar who talked about how her husband was constantly on the road selling hammers, and she just wanted a love song, and because he says something about how his parents were, they used to go to a bar all the time, and that was the last place I remember seeing them. And I thought at that point, I wonder if any of the people that we saw in the entertainment are at all related to Ezra and who he is. But I'm rambling on way too much about a very, very small scene within a much larger act. So we're gonna raise anchor here. So no pun intended, and just full steam ahead. So,
Mike, do you want to give a quick synopsis of what happened on the boat for us before we move on to the Echo River Central Exchange?
If I remember correctly, Will is trying to cook a stew by memory, and he explains his insane ability to forget and how he showed Ina, the chef, which I assume is an Ina Garten reference, how he was even able to forget his parents' names on the spot. And in the other room, I don't remember which character it is, but they're watching the recipe on TV. And yeah, they're cooking a mushroom stew. Nothing big, nothing exciting. Moving on.
The Echo River Exchange. Echo River Central Exchange.
This is the scene for me that I was like, this is the big moment. This is everything this game has been building up to.
Really?
Kinda. Maybe that's too big of a statement, but it's like this is the moment that kind of like punched me in the same way that like the entertainment punched me.
Okay, because I just screamed capitalism. Like, that's all that I did when I saw the
screams the marketing man.
Yeah.
So in this episode, or in this act, in this scene, you are going through a bat sanctuary on the Echo, and it's a conversation between Shannon and Conway, and they have the discussion. They pick up the discussion that I had referenced earlier, where they start talking about how they don't really actually know each other, and what Conway's thinking and why he's deciding to do the things that he's doing, and how the guys at the distillery are coming up with a consolidated plan for me, so I'll be okay. And Shannon just knows this is a bad idea and this is not good, and he's just given up. And you navigate your way through this sanctuary, and you get to, I think, one of the more visually like beautiful, stunning elements here, which is the Grand Central Exchange, I think that's what it's called, where phone operators are connecting when you dial 0. And it's just this beautiful, to me, kind of looks like Subway, with emerald green all along the ceiling in a arch shape, and just seeing the light bounce off of it in such a really dark game, I thought was just visually beautiful.
It's worth mentioning that contrary to the previous scenes, Shannon and Conway are not on the Mucky Mammoth itself. They're actually in a small little dinghy to try and navigate to the exchange center, because the ship itself is far too large to navigate through all the weeds and trees found within the bat sanctuary. And also I believe there was a memorial site for the miners that had drowned as well, which I thought was pretty powerful. And I think there's another scene as you're going along towards the exchange where you see another boat of similar size pass you by with 2 or 3 members from the Hard Time Boys, and they just casually wave over to Conway as if to say, hey, we'll see you in the morning. So
the thing that got me, and it kind of spoke to the I guess the class clash that happens in this game, in that like there's some writing on the actual memorial with all the helmets, and the end thing is, if any son of a bitch in that power company wants to take back these helmets as company property, just you try and see what happens when you do. And I just like, that to me was just like, yeah, that's really great. That's like, yes.
Yeah, it definitely does highlight the class struggle. One of the other really powerful moments here, and it pays off really strongly later, is while you're paddling in this little boat, just Shannon and Conway, there's a boat that passes by you, and when you turn the flashlight to it, it's 2 Hard Time Boys from the distillery. Mm-hmm. And Conway waves at them, and they wave back at Conway, and Shannon's like, what the hell is going on? And Conway says how his arms and leg, they don't hurt anymore, and how the guys at the distillery are going to take care of him. And what
Florida
you find,
Stanley smiles.
Yeah, exactly. And Conway's just kind of blissed out, right? And he's just, I think, kind of made peace with his end or his fate. And, you know, you talk with Dashiell at the desk, and then you move on to the next character, and you talk about how, you know, the big company tried to automate everything and realized that all of the machines had been programmed based on the tendencies of the humans who ran them. And that gave me a real chuckle and a laugh, knowing that's probably, you know, a true situation, a case that exists out there somewhere, that the machines were optimized for the use of people and are not optimized for other machines to be interacting with it. And they get into some philosophical discussion, but the biggest thing is at the end of this scene, when Conway and Shannon leave, the boat that passes by at the end has 3 Hard Time Boys in it now, fully skeletonized, and you realize that one of them is Conway.
Oh, what? No!
It's crazy.
You didn't pick that up?
I didn't appreciate that until after the fact. Like after the scene ended, I kind of thought, oh, that's weird. And then it goes back to sort of the overworld map scene, and Will is just casually talking about how, yeah, only one of them came back. She left her friend, and I thought, oh no, no, and I just.
Jacob, you look a little shell shocked. Words are hard, I get it.
So the dog watches as the boat goes away. Words, how do you do that?
Right? So what Jacob's experiencing right now is the moment I felt kind of being punched in the gut when I watched the 3 skeletons in the rowboat row away, knowing that there were only 2 before, and Conway did not come back to the boat with me. That to me was the moment, like, oh man, like we've essentially just seen Conway die. We've seen the death of him, right? He's no longer an individual. He's one of the Hard Time Boys. You know, I don't think any of them had names, and so this is effectively the death of him.
Now, does the
hold
dog
on.
end up coming back with us on the ship?
So now I guess words. Okay, so there's a choice. I guess there's a choice because your dog is walking along the side of this boat path, and there's either like a skull or like a go back symbol, and I had no idea what that was for. But I guess that means like your dumb on the verge of death dog can either go with the Hard Time Boys or stay with the crew.
Really? Oh.
I missed the boat on this completely.
Oh, dang. Well done. Good pun.
Oh.
Okay, so while Jacob recovers and Adam watches the reassembly of Mr. McCourt in person, yeah, to me this was the gut punch scene. This is what, I don't want to say everything has been building up to, but this is what we're here for. The effective death of Conway, the unraveling of a man that we had been, I think, largely identifying or playing through the eyes of for most of this game. And, you know, it seems like it comes so fast, but it was a slow, chonky episode. You know, there are a lot of moments throughout where you learn more about Conway and you see him just become resigned to his fate.
Okay, I built myself back up here. I knew that he was gone. I just thought that he had gone somewhere and maybe we'll see him again later.
And when your puppy died, he really did go to the farm.
Oh my god.
Oh, Michael, no!
Yep, he went to a farm upstate somewhere so he could run free with all the other dogs.
I'm broken again.
Probably went to Kentucky even. So
Yeah. So as part of the conversation that happens between Conway and Shannon, she essentially says, like, okay, I'll take your truck and I'll deliver it for you. I'll finish this for you. But because now Conway has more and other obligations. And to me, this is the moment that underlined that the debt in Kentucky Route Zero that it's talking about is more than just the dollars that you owe, and more than just the stress and the pressure around it. It is the obligations that you have to the people around you who you've associated with. And so, yeah, it's the scene for me that this whole episode is built around.
That whole idea about moral obligation, it makes so much sense, especially with the characters that you continue to amass throughout the entire game. Because I mean, Shannon could have said, no, I'm not going to join you past Elkhorn Mine, or Junebug and Johnny could have just said, no, you know what, this is where we get off. Ezra could have left on his eagle, but you've essentially amassed this party throughout the entire game, and so it's really interesting to see how that actually impacts not only the story itself, but the way in which you play the game, where, like in any RPG, the more characters that you amass, the more abilities and traits you acquire for gameplay. And you see that during the different dialogue boxes that you're given, especially in Act 3, where, you can respond with any one of the characters at one time. And so, I sometimes I like to think of it as like the Final Fantasy VII party where, Conway is Cloud and Shannon is Aerith, and, I'm still trying to figure it out, but I'm pretty sure Kaith Sith is probably Ezra, and but I digress.
So
sorry,
I'm
so broken.
From there, we move on to Sam and Ida's, which is...
Yeah, what was this?
Sam and Ida's is a great little piece. We've been told throughout that Sam and Ida's has the best food, that Ida is a celebrity around here. Mm-hmm. And it's this just a great little piece of storytelling of how this place went from a really, really subpar fried fish joint to being the place that everybody wants to come to eat around here. And yeah, you hear it from both Ida's perspective and Sam's perspective. You also get a really nice little scene where Johnny and Ezra are playing with a claw machine. And you can tell Johnny is having thoughts about, okay, well, like, maybe we should hang out with Ezra and protect him when this is all over.
Maybe we should kidnap this child.
Yeah, in a way, yes.
With consent.
Kidnapping, making a new friend. What's the difference? 2 years?
Yeah, and the conversation that he's clearly prepping to have with Junebug, and knowing that Junebug's just really afraid of losing the dynamic, but at least that's
also
what she
robots,
says.
But go on.
But it seems just really clear to me that Junebug's just really afraid of change, right? Really afraid of that maturing and not having the freedom, the loss of freedom that having someone else, really does impact. So yeah, I love the little Sam and Ida's bit. I don't know if there's a whole lot more we want to get into here, but I thought it was just a really great way to follow up a really gut-punchy scene with Conway going to his death.
Two quick things. All the food is shellacked because I guess Sam has a really bad memory and needs to look at the food before he makes the food. But also there's a fun scene where he comes up from... No, Ida?
No. So the food is shellacked as a reminder of the conversations that the two divers that had come and were talking about were having about where to find the best fresh food and fresh fish and shrimp and et cetera, and every time he looks at that meal he follows the breadcrumb trail back to that conversation, and that allows him to go out that day and find the catch of the day, the next fish.
And just as well, it inspires Ida or Ida every single day to really push the envelope with her cooking and come up with something new and exciting every single day, which also I don't know how far you guys got into the menu when trying to pick out something to eat, but I think I got about eight or nine like dialogue boxes deep, and I finally just told myself, I'm fairly positive there's no end to this menu, so I just had to pick something. But
I don't remember what I picked other than it was the third option on the first page. I'm like, this looks good. Let's go. Butterfish, like right here.
Mm-hmm. And you got to name the thing that was caught, which was also cute.
Oh, yeah.
But the last thing I remember from this scene is about music. So imagine that there's in this really bad seafood restaurant, there's like a really bad like opera singer in the background, just like singing very, very low so you can barely hear it. But then right as the scene ends, there's a boat that just moves across the scene. And it's funny, I looked into it, and it's the Bedquilt Ramblers, who are the three characters, Emily, Ben, and Bob, from the first act of the game, singing a song by Ben Babbitt.
This is a really mind-blowing moment in the game where you really realize that those three characters that we've seen time and time again, these three musicians are actually the basement people that I like to refer to them as, Ben, Bob, and Emily. And we see them in every single act throughout the game thus far. We see them at the very beginning in the basement of Equus Oils. We see them in the forest. We also see them again playing in the foreground of the Marquez house back in Act 1. And then we see them again at the door of the Museum of Dwellings in Act 3. And now we see them as sort of the Greek chorus to close out the events of this entire act. And the song that they sing is really, really hard-hitting to Shannon, of all people. At least I think so, because it talks about how I have nowhere to go and there is no such thing as home for me. And I think for someone like Shannon, after what she's done and how she just casually left Conway, it really speaks to her character. And just as well for the character Conway, there's really no going back for him, or at least he seems to think so, and he's pretty well okay with that.
He's a man resigned to his fate.
So with that, once you pass that, I think we could probably lump the two final scenes in the game together.
Yeah.
I don't think they're as eventful as the rest of the game. It's just the end of the game here. So it's a neighborhood and then the silo of late reflections. I just want to make sure, did you guys stay on the boat for any of this, or did you kind of engage with the off-boat activities?
I was off the boat for both scenes.
I honestly can't remember.
Okay.
I was definitely there for the theremin playing.
Yes. Okay. So a neighborhood. The big point there is essentially your tugboat arrives at a small houseboat, and on top of the ship, Clara plays this beautiful solo theremin piece, and essentially that's most of it. And doesn't Ezra join in too there?
Yeah. This is sort of the culmination of your playing as Ezra throughout the rest of this scene, or the rest of this act, because at any time you're playing as Ezra, you're actually given the option to record any of the found sounds that you find, whether on or off the ship. And I played the role of Junebug and Johnny off the ship, but my guess is that you were then allowed to use those found sounds and incorporate them into Clara's theremin performance. At least that was my interpretation, because even Junebug and Johnny comment off the ship while listening, saying, "No, you know what? He knows how to handle and play a tape recorder. He's pretty good at that." So
yeah, I only recorded one sound, and it was a cat. So
I also recorded that sound.
I'm fairly certain that that's what happens, is whatever sounds you record kind of come into the theremin piece. And then the final scene, which is at the Silo of Late Reflections, which I think again is a beautifully directed scene, in that like the camera comes from above and essentially it's like a spiral staircase, and the tugboat gets to a point where it cannot move any further, and the group's like, I guess this is where we continue on foot, and that's the end of the act, right?
Yeah, and they realize that they have to carry on Conway's journey without him, and so they decide to I guess they have to unload the truck to figure out what's inside, because there is, at least at this point, no physical way that they can get that truck up this rickety old flight of spiraling stairs going up this silo. And so I guess they're just going to have to carry it.
Any final thoughts about Act 4 of Kentucky Route Zero before we close this very in-depth discussion?
Yeah, so, what you had said at the top, Jacob, of, it kind of being long but not anything of note really happening or nothing really important happening, I feel like this episode is understated and it's poetic. I did not pick up on a lot of the Greek references and touchstones that you did, Jacob, but I absolutely think you're correct that those were there, because this seems like a really somber, collective, big culmination after the high point, the real climax in Act 3. And I feel like this is where we really start to, make our way towards the end. It's the signaling that we're almost there. The end is nigh. And, to me, that scene, that moment, and everything it was building up to, where Conway is just another skeleton on the boat, was so powerful and so impactful that, I see it as a success, even if it wasn't as jaw-dropping as, getting into a Dr. Evil, a villain's lair from Bond. It was important and splashy in its own way.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I guess I was underwhelmed. One, because I didn't fully understand the grasp of hey, a big thing happened and you missed it, dum-dum. But I think that just the middle part may have lost me, just because, again, we know what this game is, but there's there's so much writing in this act compared to other acts. And I think a lot of it's world building and building characters that, speak on subjects that are touched on in this thing. It lost me in the middle, but I think there are parts in it that I will absolutely always remember, including, the Rum Colony, the Radvansky Center. There's just some really cool moments, and I just don't know where the hell this game is going. But I've said that since the beginning, so this is no different.
That's my favorite part about this scene. I will say it's not my favorite scene. I certainly did enjoy it, not nearly as much as previous scenes. But the thing that I...
You mean acts, right?
Acts, yes, excuse me. But the thing that I enjoyed the most about it was that, similar to Act 3, it just leaves you with the question, where do we go from here? I mean, Conway is gone. There's this spiral staircase to nowhere, and we've still got this truck with some sort of delivery to make after this crazy boat ride. So I am very, very much excited to see where it goes from here, and I'm also really worried and disheartened to know that this is almost the end of this story, of this game. So I'm really excited to know what happens.
From here, we have another interlude, and then the finale, Act 5. So I'm really looking forward to getting into those.
And maybe something else after the Act 5, but we'll see. Speaking of all good things coming to an end, that's the end of this podcast. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to find all things Left Behind Game Club, you can do that at leftbehindgame.club on the internet. You can find us on Twitter at Left Behind Club. You can find us on Instagram at Left Behind Game Club. And if you're interested in our Discord server, we've got one of those. You can come in and talk about game deals, gaming news, and other topics. You can find the link to that on our website. Again, leftbehindgame.club or even leftbehindgameclub.com. We've got 2 URLs because we are ready. Adam, thank you so much for coming on this episode. Your 7th time the charm, I guess. If people want to find your work and what you do on the internet, where can they find you?
The best place for people to reach me is just at my website, adamiannetta.ca. It's my online professional portfolio for my work as a singer. But just as passionate as I am about music, I'm equally passionate about video games, especially great video games, and talking about them with great people such as yourselves. So I really, really do appreciate this opportunity to have talked about such an amazing game with such wonderful, wonderful people.
We always blush when you say that. Michael, if people want to find you on the internet, where can they do so?
They can find me at michaelruffalo.com, or in the Discord server. You can find that by going to leftbehindgame.club, clicking the big button in the middle of the page. That'll take you right into the Discord. I've got my knives ready. Come at me, bros. Let's go. You can also find me at RuffaloM on most social places online. But Jacob, where can the people find Mr. Conan O'Brien, Bob Barker impersonator himself, our host, the man, the myth, the legend, the one we love so dear? Where can they find you?
Wow, that is energy. You can find me on the internet at Jacob McCourt on all major social media platforms. You can find me on YouTube too, because I make YouTube videos now. YouTube.com/Jacob McCourt. There's 2 out there now. There's one that I made about cool indie games, but I've also got a second one out about the history of the launch of the Xbox 360. So you can check that out. It's neat. There may even be more there. Who knows? But Michael, what do we always say to our listeners at the end of our program?
Glory, it's good to be among friends.